Evolution from Nagios clone of Icinga with Assaf Flatto.
Hello. Raise your hand if you have never used Nagios. I've never used Nagios. Oh, so you're too young, I guess.
I'm older than him.
That's not saying much.
I'm probably younger than everybody else.
Right. Right, so first thing that I'm going to skip that one. Needs to be on. And if you've been to my previous talk, I'm going to skip that one. Or if you want me to say who I am, you can just read it. There's no need for me to iterate it. Now, I'm going to give credit where credit is due. Ethan Goldstad, founder of Nagios, he built an amazing, amazing tool for its time. He wrote it in 1999 for standalone data centers and for managing the IT of what used to be then old generation systems. Brilliant tool, Nagios. It was NetSaint at the time. He had problems with the proprietary name. NetSaint was a proprietary name for another company. Then he renamed it Nagios. And the rest is history, as we know. Now, it was so good that it became a market leader very, very fast because it was free. It gave you a lot of options. It was simple to integrate into your existing scripting that you wanted. Those of you who used Nagios, how many of you wrote plugins? How difficult was the API to actually incorporate? Can you find a more simple solution to incorporate plugins? It doesn't care what language you write. It doesn't care what text you put in. All it cares is the return code. 0, 1, 2, 3, done. Do whatever you want. Perl, Lisp, C#, whatever. Brainfuck. Write it, return 0, 1, 2, 3, it doesn't care. It'll work. So it became a market leader. And it forked, and it caused people to try to fork it and clone and basically expand on it. Shinken, Thurk, I always mispronounce this one. Shinken was basically Nagios clone written in Python. CheckMK was an expansion. It's a brilliant expansion, but again, it was embedded into Nagios. There is the multi-view that comes with it, a live status, brilliant tool, again, built to expand Nagios with its shortcoming and everything. There are more products. I can tell you there's OpsView, there's Centerity, there's a lot of things. All of them use the Nagios as a code base, as an engine, because it was good for its time, again. Empire's fall. Nagios grew too big for its own good. They decided to go commercial. They didn't scale up. They decided to stick with the engine, build it up, and remain focused on a standalone device. They didn't assign any changes that the community wanted to do. Community came and says, we want this. We want the ability to do management like that. We want to be able to do lots of things. And the answer was, we're sticking with the engine. The UI, we don't care. So, and also when you're trying to submit patches and you basically get the stop sign, you can't read anything, people were frustrated. 2009, Icinga is born. Forked from Nagios source code. Code team basically mostly based in Germany. Now the team looked at the community, looked at the ecosystem and said, what do you guys want? What could be good for you in a monitoring system? Yeah, that was the pages. Try to find that now today, it's going to be a problem. But people were submitting their issues and their views of what the monitoring system should give them. And there was a voting system. You say one thing and people say, oh yeah, I want that too, or I want that too. And those things went into the initial releases. I think one of my ideas about multiple selection of acknowledging or disabling checks actually went in there. I was very happy to see it. Then we went on becoming a bit better at asking for input. We have the dev. You submit your patches, you submit your bugs, you submit your reports, and we're taking it to the dev team, to the QA team, the documentation team, and we integrate it faster, easier, more community input, better product comes to everybody. Birthing pains. Every new thing has a birthing pains. So the biggest one was its Nagios code. It's still Nagios. It's different name, it's more features. But the limitations of the Nagios code are still there. You're encumbered with the doesn't scale. It's not very easy to replicate. So you're stuck with a single machine, although you want to be able to answer for a lot more things. Redundancy and availability, which I just said. You don't have it. Nagios, if you want to do redundancy, you have to use the check Nagios and then check if it's available. It doesn't do. You have to basically do an active check, not something that comes integrated built in. And then you have to, all right, I see that the other server fell over. I need to log in event handler to tell it, all right, now start the alerting and disable other things. So basically, you have to write the whole mechanism instead of, oh, this one's dead. I'm working. Let's go. Which is what every newer solution came up with. If you look at many other tools, the monitoring tools that are available, which support high availability, they don't have to do 6 loops around the city to actually get the redundant server to go up. They just, oh, this one dead, I'm going on. And improving to the UI. Lift your hand who used the old UI without the exfoliation skin theme, and liked it. You liked the old Nagios UI? All of you? Wow. I'm a standalone in this one. I think it's horrid. Let's do better. If anybody used that in Icinga 1, my condolences. It was bad. It tried to improve. It ended up being more complicated than the actual configuration of everything else. Other things we wanted to do better. Reporting based on Jasper. I know some very tech-savvy people who were having problem with that. IDO, that's actually done better. We took the NDO, removed some of the bottlenecks that had in that, and we added Postgres and Oracle for a time. That was dropped eventually, but Postgres was a big step. People really like that, the fact that they don't have to be encumbered with the limitation of MySQL, or MySQL as you guys want to call it. IRPE, that was Michael's idea of fixing NRPE by actually incorporating true SSL encryption. You guys use NRPE, anybody? Or used NRPE? It does have a flag of use SSL. Do you actually configure any key encryption? No. Version 3.02 just came out 4 months ago, finally has true SSL encryption. And in any other place that you go into use Nagios, they said, yes, we're SSL encrypted. They actually got the DSS PCI approval because they're saying, yes, we have SSL. No, you didn't. Michael wanted to fix that, and he also wanted to incorporate IPv6. Good ideas, but the IRP never cut. Everybody else just kept on using NRP, so it was dropped. However, market penetration. The year 2000, by the end of by the end of 2009, we had 10,000 downloads. By the end of 2010, 70,000. And 2012, 100,000 downloads for Icinga. For a product 3 years old, I think that's a very good market catch-up. But in 2010, we were 23 members, and the core team reaches the understanding that Icinga 1, as it stands, with the assumption of Nagios core, has reached its capacity. It needs a revolutionary idea. It needs to move differently. It has to go in a different way. It can't rely on Nagios core and Nagios code anymore. It needs a fresh start. Icinga 2 is imagined. A fully distributed redundant system. Able to run on any OS. Yes, it can run on Windows. No, I wouldn't recommend it. Except for the agent. That's fine. I'm not talking about the core. The core, no, I wouldn't recommend it. Dynamic configuration. You have a DSL. It's a fully dynamic with logic implementation into it. You can run your ifs. You can then do your regex experiments all in the same configuration. There's no need to wrap things around it. You don't have to break anything, unlike in Nagios, where the regex was horrid. Simple feature enable, disable. You want a checker, you want logs, you want debug. enable feature, disable feature. You don't have to go into a configuration file, edit it, save, go out, restart, make sure you didn't fuck anything up. You just enable, disable, done. It's agile, it's very fast. Last benchmark I saw, no, the first benchmark I saw had it beat the Icinga core, the original Icinga core, in about, if I remember correctly, by 60% for the same amount of testing. So it was much faster. It was a new code based, and the initial first commit was 28th of March 2012. Almost 5 years to the date, almost. Now this is a topology of Icinga, the concept of topology. You have the master, which is broken down into the agents, the clusters, checkers, notification, perf data generation, which can be incorporated, and then at the graphite and PNP. This is an old an old picture. It improved since then, and we'll see the integration that came out afterwards. And you have the externals. You can connect it to the classic UI that you can borrow off, can be borrowed off Nagios. You have the old Icinga web. Again, we don't want to use that. The IDODB, of course, we want to submit everything to the database so we can do reporting and build it or submit reports for anything else. And Icinga Web 2. We'll get to that one in a minute. This is redundant. Now, any of those components can be placed on a different server. Any of those. Those preferably on the same server, but you can run the multiple servers, so it's not a problem. Distributed. You don't need to be able to, you don't need everything in the same server, in the same room, and you can have the data transfer from one server to another. You can have zones which are not interconnected. You can monitor Moscow, Sao Paulo, Tokyo. Each is independent. They're reporting to the same master, and they're unaware of the other. But in case the master falls, each of them can actually pick up and become the new master, then become aware of the others. But while he's a zone and it's not a master, it doesn't know of them. Like I said, able to run on any OS. C++ is a wonderful thing. And you can download these for your implementation. As I mentioned, this is there. I think Mac is also there somewhere. Can we see it? No. I know there's somebody who's running Icinga 2 on Mac. Never tried it myself. Dynamic configuration. The new configuration is JSON-like. It's not exactly JSON. It's a bit better. But it's dynamic. And the syntax is similar. I think the better analogy would be like the Puppet DSL. But it's more like JSON. Everything is an object. Unlike when we had associations of, in the old configuration language, you have to find everything in its own stanza. Here, everything is an object. The user, the host, the service, the checks. The notification itself, it's an object. So it's an object-oriented configuration file, which you can do as you wish. It's quasi-code, like I mentioned. If, match, apply, exclude. If you want something included for specific or something, all you have to do is the regex and the logic, and it's there. There's no need to think sideways and see how you can bend the rules in order to match it. The rules are there to capture what you need. And we have the REST API, which is a wonderful thing. There's no need anymore, if you don't want to be restricted by going to configuration files and adding and removing servers. All you have to do is send an API call. What was that? That sound wasn't for me. An API call. You can integrate that into your init scripts when you're loading a new server into the cloud. User init, or I don't remember what it is, user data, or I don't remember what it is in Google. You put that, or that actually, into your user init. It contacts the server. Everything is defined. It comes up monitored with the group, with the checks. That's it. You know you're shutting down the server. You can put a similar API call, and the server removes himself from Icinga. No need to go, oh, we got an alert because the server went down. Let's connect that until 3 o'clock in the morning. Everything is dynamic. You add the users, you add the services. You want a service. You don't have to log into the system. You use an API call, you define a new service, you define a new host, you define a user. Everything is an API. You can do everything without actually changing configuration files. I think that's a big win. Then we have a new Icinga Web 2. PHP based. I know there's a lot of people who say that PHP is dead or they don't like it, but I think PHP is a wonderful thing if you're building dynamic web pages and dynamic sites. So PHP is still alive, it's good, and that's why we use Icinga 2. And one of the greatest thing about Icinga 2 is modules. You can incorporate your modules. This one specifically, as you can see, we have built in the documentation, the monitoring, testing, and transition. These are built in. They come integrated into your default installation, which is the basic things you want, the monitoring and the documentation. Unless you know all the documentation by heart, and in that case you don't need it. Doubtful. But you have, as you can see above here, modules you can download. They're all now on GitHub. Previously it was on the dedicated Git of Icinga. Now it's in GitHub. You can download the module. You incorporate it. There's a module. You just download it into the directory, and you go to the web interface. That's it. It's done. It's enabled, configured. You can do it. Now, any of you use those? None? I know you did, so don't raise your hand.
Don't ask.
I'm expecting somebody else. Anyway. Yeah, I'll raise both my hands against those two. Both my hands. They are frustrating as hell. What they did, basically, you put your configuration into MySQL, then it takes them and converts them to configuration files, then reloads. So why would I want that in order to do the same thing that the system wants? Icinga Director. The biggest name and the biggest fun we have with Icinga now is an online GUI. Basically a UI which allows you to configure everything from there because it integrates against the API. Everything you do in the director is an API call. So there's no need to actually understand. With this one, you don't actually need to understand the API. All you have to do is click, drag and drop, and select what you want, and you define it. There's templating, there's zones, there's user, so there's logic. Everything you can think about is here. It's a work in progress. Thomas is working very hard every time. Every time I go to Icinga Conf, I see him clicking away and making advancement and then giving a talk about the latest thing, and half the classes leaves after that because people just come to that and the API talk by Michael. And everybody just then leaves because they heard what they want. But this is a really brilliant tool, and you no longer need to actually understand the configuration, which is good and bad. You want to understand what's going on behind, but for the layman new sysadmin that comes in and needs to understand how to configure the monitoring, brilliant tool. No need to do that. No need for me to spend 6 hours just reading documentation. Integrations of Icinga and Icinga Web. Should I actually list all those? And this is out of date. Since I actually made that, I think there came 2 or 3 more integrations. The big names are self-explanatory. Elasticsearch, Chef, Docker, Puppet, Big Panda, Graylog, all of them. They're all integrated, and they all have their modules that are working with Icinga 2. Community engagement. We moved to GitHub because I don't remember what was the exact reason, but if you look at the number of commits and records and issues that were developed, the community is so involved in the process because they give us input, and they're telling us what they want. So now the market is not saturated, but we are more attuned to the community than ever before. People now that we moved to GitHub, came in, everything is much more accessible. People have the ability to contribute even more, not just submit the bug reports or telling them on IRC or in Twitter or anything that there's a problem. They can actually clone the code, put a pull request, and we can actually see what they want. It's faster, it's easier, it's more accessible, it actually listens to what you guys want. Like I said, this is for the vagrant boxes. In order to allow people to the ease of use of the Icinga 2, we provided an easy way to implement it. Vagrant boxes that build your infrastructure. In all those cases, with InfluxDB, with Elasticsearch, with Graylog, forget about that, that's gone. But look at the number of commits for that. People are actually actively sending patches, requests, and information they want incorporated, because when you have this, my demo is supposed to be 17 minutes in the previous presentation. This gives you in 10 minutes. But that's Vagrant. That's something else. It's a VM. It doesn't rely on building also servers in AWS, although you can probably convince Vagrant to build you something in the AWS. And of course, Docker. How much faster can it be than Docker? These are the official ones from us. Just do Docker run, you're sorted. You have your Icinga instance. Although I would recommend actually doing that just for testing and learning. Don't put your production on Docker, otherwise every transient data that you have, bye-bye, when Docker dies.
But Assaf, Adobe Jordan, for example, the guy who's contributing the Docker, they're running everything in Docker. So Adobe is monitoring with Icinga to everything.
Yes, but
whatever they do with it, but something is running in a container.
They're running it with persistence data volumes.
That could be, yeah.
Yeah,
That could be.
that's I tested it myself. Persistent data volumes, yes, fine, do it. But if your configuration shouldn't remain on your Docker. It should be external.
Makes sense.
Also, your SQL database, your RRD files or perf data, never on your single Docker. Put it somewhere external where it's persistent, then you're good. Community contributions. Icinga Exchange. If you've worked with Nagios, you probably heard about Monitoring Exchange and Nagios Exchange. Similar to that, we have the Icinga Exchange. Monitoring Exchange, monitoring plugin actually, were the guys who were running the monitoring plugins for Nagios, but then they decided they had a falling out with Nagios and they forked out themselves for monitoring plugins in the standalone website. Nagios Exchange didn't like the fact that other people were using its content for other monitoring platforms, so Icinga Exchange came in. Yes, I see that. You point, yes. But that's when you actually Google, browse there first time, that's just jumps in. It's not that I picked it up myself, right? If you've seen the first, I have enormous credit for Nagios. I don't hate it. So, no, this is just the front page. Users ecosystem. Because we're trying to approach the community as fast as possible and give as much as better ways to incorporate into your systems, we decided to help. Ansible playbooks. I found a bug. Chef cookbook, Puppet modules. Anybody want to volunteer writing for CF Engine or SaltStack? Anybody using any of those? Okay, fine. Now we're in the Premier League. He mentioned Adobe. There they are. These are just some of the companies that are using Icinga. And you can't call them small, especially not that one, or that one, or that one. Especially that one, if something goes wrong, we all never know about it. So as you can see, Icinga is no longer something new, something small that, yeah, it's just another monitoring tool that based on Nagios. This is something that people where they're smart people actually evaluate it, know what they want, and they're using it. So, well, again, I'm smart, fast. That's me. Any questions?
Command line client.
Sorry?
You have a command line client. I found something with Nagios. If the Nagios service is quite remote, it's very slow at updating. I believe there is some sort of Python utilities where you can actually look at some alerts on the command line. But I'm not sure tried running something like that.
We do. Icinga 2 and Icinga Web actually comes with a new command line interface that allows you to integrate and check. We also have what's called Icinga Studio, which allows you to read the API calls and get the data from the API on your server. So you don't actually have to connect to the web interface itself, but you can connect to the API or you can connect to the CLI to gather more information. And Nagios had Nagios Stats. That's the only CLI that it had. It didn't actually have a new CLI that allows you to connect itself. Maybe the Nagios XI does, but the Nagios itself, Nagios Core, does not have it. Yes?
How close are Nagios and Icinga Net these days? In particular, if you've got a Nagios installation and you want to convert, is that an easy thing?
No. No. Well, if you want to convert, you can convert to Icinga 1. Although we're not, it's end of life if you want to call it like that. There's no further support. So the engine and the conversion from Nagios to Icinga 1, seamless. You wouldn't have any problem. The problem for Icinga 1, from Nagios to Icinga 2, it's going to be a problem because all the configuration is completely different. The configuration schemes, the data is completely different. So you'll have to convert everything, all your configuration, all your schemes and the database scheme to Icinga 2. Now, there used to be a translation script, I'm not sure if it's still supported, that enabled to do that. You used to read the old configuration and convert it to Icinga 2 configuration. I'm not sure if it's still available, but to convert from Nagios to Icinga 2, it'll take effort. But I think it's personally that it's worth it.
But in other words, they're basically separate products these days.
Yes.
They're no longer.
Icinga 2 and even Icinga 2 and Icinga 1, which is the closest thing you get to Nagios from Icinga, they're completely separate products now. Although they have the same name, they're completely different. Right? Yes.
So is it the same story from Icinga 1 to Icinga 2?
In essence, yes, except for the conversion script. Yeah, because again, the syntax is completely different. I could probably show you the syntax of an old Nagios configuration that I have here. Define something, open the stanza. And then I can show you, if I go back a bit, we will see the configuration of a service. That. Something's stuck in my slide probably. This is how a service looks in Icinga 2. You see, this is an apply service. The same as you define a service in Nagios, it would be different to this one because you have to import. The import is called use, the command is different. So it'll take your time. It's feasible. There is the conversion script that I think you can find, but it'll take time. It's not straight on copy paste.
I've just gone through that now, and the migration script, I tried it and it just didn't really work helpfully, so I've had to just start again.
Yeah.
From Nagios. But I was going from Nagios to version 2 straight away.
Nagios and Icinga 1, in essence, it's the same configuration files.
Exactly.
So you will have to do that. The conversion script, Compat was its name, if I remember correctly, was a proof of concept that Michael did. It worked in small stages, but then it dropped it because it wasn't worth maintaining. Any more questions? Yes?
So I've got a bunch of pretty small web servers and just run a few websites and things like that.
Yeah.
And I use Monit at the moment, which just basically goes, check is web running on this site, on this host.
Mm-hmm.
If not, email me.
Sure.
Am I going to get anything more out of Icinga? Given my fairly limited use case, I'm not going to be using all the fancy features. All I want is basically, are these services running? Email me if they're not.
For your limited use case, no, Monit will do fine. Because if you only want to know if the website is giving you a 200 response, if not, then email you. Yeah, the tool that you have is fine. If you wanted it to be more reliable, in case I assume that's not production.
Well, it's production, but they're not important like websites. The things like my personal site and stuff. So if it goes down for 10 minutes, it's not going to really change the world.
So for that low-key monitoring, No, you wouldn't get any value from any other product, not just Icinga, from any other product, because all you want to do is, oh, the website is up, good. No. So I wouldn't tell you to switch. I will tell you to switch because I think Icinga is better, but that's because my preferences. But for your limited needs, any monitoring system would do. Anything that can see, oh, the website's out, send me an alert. That's it. It could be a bash script for all I care, right? There's no need for something more robust if you're not using it. If you've been to, if you would have been by my previous talk, I said use the tool that you know and just know what you want to monitor, and then by that use the tool. I think I can do that. Is it an overkill? Maybe. But you have a tool that's working, it's not complicated. You wouldn't get anything else unless you configure it to do something else. Yes?
You mentioned configuration is basically dynamic. Now, is that really what the feature that you use if you've got Docker or virtual machines and Amazon Web Service, whatever, that you spin up on the fly and then shut down? I mean, do you actually treat that as, I have a new machine here, define it, monitor it 5 minutes later, stop monitoring it? Is that the, am I making sense?
You are making sense. I understand what you're coming through and what you're asking, but that logic will not apply for time schedules. Although you can incorporate time zones for monitoring, like you did before. What you're asking, what your case is, if you're spinning up a new machine, first of all, you need to register it. That's the API. And if it falls, like I mentioned, you can actually put the API call to remove it. So, and if you can also tell it, basically, if you, when you register it, tell it which time limitation on when to monitor it. Say, all right, I want this time zone for 1 o'clock to 2 o'clock. Then it will just use that one. You associate it with the monitoring window, and that's it. Yes, and that's the way it's dynamic, in one way. Any more questions? Yes.
Do you still have an RPE support underneath there? Or is there a
Yes and no.
way of-
Yes and no. We support NRPE, but we also have the Icinga client itself. There's a native Icinga client you can run remotely on the nodes that you want to monitor. It uses a proprietary, I wouldn't call it proprietary, but it uses a different port in the protocol than NRPE, and I recommend using that instead of NRPE.
But
We support it.
has an investment in legacy, like my previous company had a huge investment in legacy and RPE. You could swap the front end out for Icinga and
Well,
switch out that stuff. And
we support the clients that exist in the ecosystem in the monitoring. We can monitor over SSH, NS client, and of course NRP, but the recommendation would be to use the Icinga client. Yes?
Can you give an example of templates and attributes?
Templates and attributes.
The last line.
I see. Let's see. I'll close this. Just a second. I'll bring it in a minute. Come on. Where is it? Right. Attributes. Do you guys see fine, or do you need me to raise the font? Right. This is a host attribute or service attribute. I should probably show you a host defined with it. Just a second. You can see that, right? Host attributes, vars. Vars is a dictionary where you can specify attributes where you specify whichever you want. Some are ingrained, like OS or known, but you can define your own if you want to. And then you can use them as variables to read them somewhere else in other configuration. So we have the OS. I've specified something called VM, virtual machine, and I specified this is AWS. State, production, or whatever, and NRP, no SSL. Now in the services, you see, I'm telling it, all right, assign this service where the host address, it has a host address, and it's in production. That's how I refer to it. Or this is specifically matching a service, specific name or service. And this is how you basically, you assign an attributes into the vars dictionary, and then you can relate to it in any check or service you want, use that one or apply. This is what the attribute that we saw. Where is that? Yes, that's. Damn. That's why I hate. No, just a second. The API. Then shut up. Yeah. So here you see the attributes. It says, all right, it has an address, the IP. This is where it assigned it. It will actually take it when you actually put those in. Of course, the IP is a variable that you'll have to put in the API call. It will assign that to the host name, generate it, and based on the attributes that you have in this attributes is actually what we saw as the vars dot something. It will put those in. Okay, so it'll put those in, and then you can it will extrapolate and assign the services based on the information that you have here. Okay, here we don't have it. Oh, the vars PNP check. This is a PNP check argument, which is the PNP module is looking for it in order to generate the graphs and the performance data. Okay. Yes. Yes.
I found that Icinga Director was massively difficult, actually, coming from completely. I've used OpenNMS, so I'm used to semi-graphical setups, but I could not get my head around Icinga Director, and in fact, I ended up completely wiping the VM and restarting and going for raw config files.
Okay.
So I don't know whether if there's. I mean, that was about a year ago, so I don't know if the documentation has been improved. But there's no concept of when you need to actually set up templates or any. I found the documentation exceedingly confusing of how to actually do things with Director.
Okay, that's good.
Obviously, there's a massive change from a massive conceptual change from OpenNMS to Icinga.
Yes.
So, do you know if the documentation has been improved recently? Or
In the last year, yes.
Okay.
And we are always striving to improve both documentation and the product.
Yeah.
So yes, whether it's up to the level you want it to be, I don't know. But give it another try. If not, open. Like I said, it's on GitHub now.
Yeah.
You can always fork and give us a review, pull request. If that doesn't help, you can always try getting help on the IRC channels. I'm also sitting on the IRC. I didn't put my contact there, but IK Linux in the IRC channel, always there. A lot of the guys from the team are in there, so you can put your input, open pull request. We're always available to help. And if you find an issue with the documentation, by all means, send a patch. Documentation, as everybody else here knows, is the stepbrother that nobody wants to touch. Although we have a team for that one, there are other things, and they're always lagging, and there's always more documentation that you can always put in. Right, any more questions? In that case, thank you very much.